Today I want to talk to you about EDA. I mentioned EDA because I've been getting a lot of questions recently about EDA and the different steps in the process and things along those lines, right? So just so we're all on the same page, when we're talking about EDA, we're talking about exploratory data analysis. And there really is no single way to go about it. Your team will have your own approach to it. And it's all going to be dependent on the data and the individual project that's in front of you, things along those lines. But what I really want to impress upon some of you today, because I've been seeing this again in some of the conversations I've been having, is that I want you to remember that EDA is not just for you. It's not just for your team. EDA is both for you and for your stakeholder, because you are going to be presenting some data and some visualizations and other things that in many cases your stakeholders simply haven't seen before. In other cases, they may have seen some of those items, but you're going to give it to them in a much more in-depth way than what they're used to. So you keep that in mind, that EDA is not just about the numbers, but it's also about how the business perceives those numbers and looks at the results, or looks at least the initial results of your EDA. Now, why do I say initial results? Here's why. Another reason why I wanted to do this intro on EDA is because I've been getting a lot of different questions about the tools that we should be using for EDA. Now, the challenge that I've seen in some of those questions and answers that I received is that a lot of people are talking about presenting EDA in some sort of final report format or something that's, kind of really a final report. I guess is the best way to say it. So I've seen people who have reached out to say that they do it with Canva graphics, or they do it with PowerPoint, or things along those lines. That might be okay in some scenarios, but overall, I'm really not on board with that. The reason I say that is because part of the EDA process is giving your stakeholders, not your team, but your stakeholders, an interactive way to work with the data and work with your findings so far. So in other words, EDA should consist mostly of you creating the data pipelines you need to get to that stage, you creating some visualizations and maybe pulling out some initial insights. But then there should also be a phase where your stakeholders will have interactive tools to be able to look at their own data and look at the EDA. In other words, they can create their own cuts of data and their own ways of looking at it. So that's really where those tools like Canva, like PowerPoint, don't really serve a good purpose there for you, right? They're a little bit more fixed or static in that way. The reason you want to do this is because ultimately your data science team is still just a technical team. Your stakeholders are going to know the business side, right? You're a technical team, you're not a business team. It's your stakeholders that you're doing the project for that are really going to determine the next phase, which is, ideation and figuring out what you can do with your data, right? So you want to make sure that you're enabling them to be able to look at their own data and be able to exercise their own curiosity about their own domain knowledge, their own bias, things along those lines, to be able to give you other insights. Here's where you're doing EDA right. You've approached a really positive stage of EDA when you can have the pipelines, have a tool like Power BI or Tableau, something interactive. You present your insights, but then a couple weeks later, your stakeholder comes back and says, hey, I appreciate your insights, but here's 4 other things that we found by looking at data. We were surprised that our sales go up in the second half of the year because you gave me the ability to look at it by quarter or by seasonality, and I was able to put this and this together, and here's where we want to go with it. That's where you've reached a pretty, perhaps the most beneficial stage of EDA, where you're not necessarily coming up with the insights, but your business team, your client, your stakeholders are able to work with the data and they give you the insights, and then they're contributing to the idea generation of where the algorithmic effort should go, to build upon that EDA. So I want you to think about it in those terms, because that's really where EDA kind of takes off on you. That's really the beneficial of it. It shouldn't be a one-way conversation where you're just giving your results and then your stakeholder just accepts them. Give your stakeholders a way to access the data and play with the data. So again, just to bring it full circle, that's why I'm such an advocate of things like Power BI, Tableau, the items where you can enable your stakeholder to have interactive tools to be able to work with their own data. They're going to know their data best, so don't try to be the only team that's doing the EDA. You're going to need the input of your stakeholders throughout that process. So I hope that gives you something to think about, because again, I think that this is a really important aspect of data science, and it's something that there is no right way to do it, but I am trying to present you with kind of the standard of where you can get when you're doing EDA at a high level.